You're checking out the Investor Shed podcast with Nick Beveridge and Jeremy Kitchen. They're on the path to financial freedom and they're taking their community with them. Stay tuned for the best free real estate investing advice on the internet.
Welcome home to the Investor Shed podcast. My name is Nick Beveridge, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Jeremy Kitchen. Good morning.
Good morning. How are we doing today, Nick?
Doing great. Today it's a little overcast, but it's Monday, and I'm ready to start this week. It's
Nice.
Spring break is over.
Yeah, we're back at work, baby. We're back at work. Not like we ever left. We didn't go anywhere. Speaking of not going anywhere, you're not going to want to go anywhere for this episode because we got Jeff Utecht on the episode today.
That's right. Yes, we do. This guy's a machine, isn't he?
Yeah, Jeff is a great dude to talk to. He's got a lot of experience in investing and just growing his business. He started his career as an educator, and he obviously knew there was a drive for more. And with that drive for more, where do you think he turned? He turned to real estate.
That's right. So over the course of 5-6 years or so, he was able to grow a portfolio of 18 rental properties.
Yep.
So you're gonna love it. You're gonna love his story, how
Yeah.
he gets through his day. Listen up, a lot of good nuggets in here. Speaking of nuggets, eat some nuggets before you start this podcast because you're gonna be hungry for more.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Here we go. All right. Welcome back to the Investor Shed podcast. I'm Nick Beveridge with Jeremy Kitchen. Good morning.
Top of the morning. How we doing today, Nick?
Doing great. Doing great. And today we have a great guest, Jeff Utecht. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, gentlemen.
Thank you for being here.
No worries.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for being here, Jeff. We appreciate it. So quick little background about Jeff. Jeff actually interviewed me on his real estate podcast on the Washington State Real Estate Investor podcast back in October of 2022. And he really ignited my passion for being on a podcast. So now I'm here now, almost thanks to you, Jeff. So thank you so much for getting me on your podcast that one time. I appreciate it. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself real quick, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you gentlemen, for having me here. My wife and I are educators by trade. I was a fourth grade teacher. My wife was a 20-year school counselor before she retired to take over the real estate empire. She actually manages the day-to-day and oversees property managers. And we now have one Airbnb that also has a property manager, but there's just upkeep on stuff all the time. So she retired, and I say retired, but I guess I don't know. Anyway, in 2018, she kind of overtook that, and we started building our real estate empire in 2018. And we were lucky and fortunate enough that as educators, we moved overseas and we taught at international schools, and which just gave us some different financial freedoms that we have. We've never been a 401k household. We've never done that because we moved overseas. And when you live overseas and you teach at international schools, you're in charge of your own retirement. And so when we were getting ready to move back home in 2012, move back here to Seattle, we had to do something with our retirement money. And that kind of really got us started into thinking like, okay, well, what are we going to do? My wife will never buy a turnkey property, no matter how much I would love to just buy a turnkey property. That's not my
It's more and
wife's.
more appealing every single day, it seems
Yes,
like.
it does. That's so true. But we bought a condo in downtown Seattle, and able to renovate that whole thing, and instantly saw the appreciation. Like we didn't know what we were doing, right? We were moving back into. Thought we were going to be this cool hip downtown Seattle condo. Put a bunch of money into it, and then all of a sudden we're like, wow, that really increased the price of the condo. That's kind of interesting. Like we were just
Yeah.
we were just kind of getting into it. Yeah. And that just kind of got us started. We flipped a couple homes using hard money,
Mhm.
and then started to really take on the BRRRR strategy. Right now we're sitting at 18 doors with 9 properties,
Awesome.
all in the Spokane, Washington area.
Very cool.
What gave you the actual idea like that real estate investing was a good idea?
I think like most people, it was probably Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I started hounding my wife. I read that book in 2007, 2008, when all of a sudden we had all our student loans paid off. We were living in Shanghai, China at the time. And we were starting to see our bank account kind of go in the positive. And again, we didn't have any retirement funds. Like there are no retirement funds. So think of all the money that goes into retirement is just going into your bank account. And so I'm looking at my wife saying, we got to do something with this money. Like it can't just sit here. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I started hounding my wife, and of course, my wife, you know, was very much of the mindset, as I think a lot of people are, of just, why we just got out of debt. Why do we want to go back in debt? Why I don't
Right.
try to wrap your head around the difference between, and I like to say good debt, bad debt. I still work in education, and I talk a lot with kids saying, well, there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. You just have to know the difference when you're actually, going in and thinking about debt. And so, yeah, that was probably it. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then, like I said, we bought the condo, we saw how that worked, and we flipped a couple homes and made a little bit of money. And that just kind of got the system running, and listened to a ton of podcasts and self-taught ourselves. So.
And dude, I would have loved to have a teacher like you that would actually explain the difference because, going through school, I didn't just take like what my teachers said with a grain of salt. Like I really embodied like what they actually said because they were like, I don't know, you just trust what teachers say. And if no, everybody put a bad light on debt, and it makes sense because that's just the way people were raised, but could you expand on that a little bit? And like, do you get any flack from any of your colleagues, or do you even have to work with any other teachers out there that kind of hear what you're saying? And do they criticize you at all?
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I actually was just on another podcast that was for international educators,
Okay.
talking about how, as international educators, you can, set up your own retirement fund using real estate, and it doesn't have to be in the U.S. I mean, you can
Hmm.
do this anywhere, right? But I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that happens, and again, I am an educator myself. My full-time job is consulting with school districts, doing parent presentations, doing presentations at school districts. But we still have that same mindset. We have a financial class that a lot of students have to go through in high school, and the number one thing we teach kids is debt is bad. And I don't think that's the right mindset. I mean, just to put it in perspective, I've got two goddaughters. One is in her first year of university, the other one will graduate this year. And they're freaking out because they're going to have student debt. And I'm like, well, yes, you want to keep student debt to a minimum, but student debt isn't bad debt as long as the major that you are getting, the certificate you are getting, your job that you see coming out the other side can help pay off the debt. And I think that is something. And so it's even just from that standpoint. In high school, we say don't have any debt, and then you go to university, and the majority of kids have to take out debt, and it just is. And so then we're freaking kids out. We're seeing kids actually not going to university, which we still know today is like the number one thing to propel you forward is a university degree, regardless of what you want to do. Not that you have to. There's a lot of different places, but statistically, going to university just opens up different pathways for you. But if you're going to pay $225,000 to become a teacher where the starting salary is $67,000, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
And I think that's part of the thing. Like it's not about the debt itself. It's like, okay, I'm going into debt, but what's the outcome of that debt? If I can go to a state university and I come out with $30,000 of debt and my starting salary is $67,000, okay, well that's something different, right? There's just ways that you have to look at those numbers and understand what debt is, and then I think you're okay. But again, most people go in debt to buy a car, and that's
Right.
usually not bad debt as long as you're not buying a Ferrari.
Right.
So
Buy within your means for sure. Don't go
yeah,
over leveraging
absolutely.
yourself on something you don't need to. Nick, were you gonna expand on that a little?
And I'm just guessing. I think kids just don't know what they don't know, and I wish like they would teach you at a very young age, like maybe even in elementary school, like how to put your life in like a P&L or something. Like
Hmm.
teach you,
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great idea.
Right.
because just like you said, a college degree could be considered bad debt or good debt. Depends on how much income you're going to bring in, and if you could just put your whole life like on a P&L, here's how much income I have coming in. Here's my monthly expenses. Does it make sense for what I'm doing with life? It could make a lot of decisions easier in the future if you just kind of run your decision making off your life P&L. And I just wish teachers would actually teach that to kids very young, and maybe it's just this ongoing course of like your life P&L. Does this make decision?
Yeah,
Does this make financial sense?
yeah. And I think the other class nowadays, in 2023 and beyond, we're looking at, I think every middle school, high school kid should take an entrepreneur class, to your point, like
100%.
understanding what P&L is, understanding, I mean, we know like the way our industry is going, 50% of the workforce by 2025 is going to be consultants or entrepreneurs running your own business in some way. And we all know in real estate, that's really what you are. You're running a business, right? That's what real estate is. You've become your own business. You are running a business. You're growing. You're looking at financials. You're trying to figure out, how do I sustain it? It's entrepreneurship. And so we're going to continue to go that way for multiple different reasons, which I won't get into. That's a whole talk on itself that I do.
That's a
Yeah.
whole nother thing, I think.
Yeah. But
Yeah. I just wish people would understand like there's businesses within businesses too. And especially if you're in real estate, you have each house is its own business that has a P&L that you should focus to. And it all comes together in your life P&L. Does it make sense? Anyway, we could change gears now. Go ahead, Jeremy.
No, that's good. It's a good segue because we're going to talk about creating a real estate business anyway. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the education aspect. Obviously, when you're going to school and you're talking about college and university and everything like that, a lot of those principles can be converted into like, your return on income or your cash on cash return, basically, right?
yeah, I mean, and I think even if we just do it, we understand that with students is even in high school, if there's a way to say, your investment right now is time and energy when you're in high school. The
Hmm.
outcome of that is this thing called a high school diploma.
Right.
And a high school diploma puts you that much farther ahead. Then you can go to a 2-year or 4-year college. That puts you that much farther ahead.
Hmm.
You get another certificate. That puts you that much farther ahead. You go to a real estate class. That puts you that much farther ahead. There's just like time and energy is also an input
Hmm.
in your P&L, right? And so thinking about what is the time and energy involved, it doesn't always have to be money.
Sure.
It could be reading books. It could be listening to podcasts. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do professional learning for yourself. But I think that if we could do that at a younger age, we could set people up to be more financially aware. I find that's a lot of what it is. It's just not understanding finances and understanding that we got into this really bad habit of just thinking a 401k was going to be all I needed. And it was
Right.
my company's job to take care of my retirement. And we're seeing that more and more. It's going to happen. I mean, for the majority of baby boomers,
Hmm.
it happened, right? Like there was enough there. The way the system was set up was to support them. But every generation after the baby boomers, we're looking at more and more that your 401k just isn't going to be enough to really sustain probably the lifestyle that you want. And so you're
Hmm.
going to have to understand, how do you invest outside of that as well, and make sure that you are, just knowing what your profit and losses are, and where's your money going, and who's getting your money in.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I've been only in this business for about a year or two, just kind of really dipping my toe in the investing world. I've learned more in this last year or two than I've learned my entire adult life. I was an employee for a very long time. I own a business now, and now I've seen how people operate, and I've seen what can get you out of the rat race. So getting a taste of that is really cool. But Jeff, I do want to talk about creating your real estate business. So obviously you've been going for a while. You said you had 18 doors. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. 18 doors, 9 properties.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about how you started that out. Like, what was your first property like?
Yeah. So, like I said, we flipped a couple houses, and that was kind of our first, and we used hard money on that.
Hmm.
We've used almost every kind of money you can use, and that's part of me. Like I'm very entrepreneurial focused. I've started, I don't even know how many businesses at this point. I think I'm 6 or 7 businesses in that I've started in my career, and so I'm always trying to push to think of where does this go. So after we flipped a couple houses, we lost money on one. That was probably the best learning that could have happened. It was one of the first ones that we did, and we were like, "Oh wow, we really got to tighten this ship up." And then we were able to make money on the next 3, and then that got us into long-term holding, and we were looking at ways of building wealth. We were lucky enough that in the Spokane area, and I use the word lucky in that we kind of started looking at this in 2000, what would have been 18, 17, 18, right before the market really started to take off. So we were able to we found a single family, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, single family house for $72,000.
Nice.
And we're able to pay cash for it, rent it, get it up to, be able to get it livable. Rent, I think the first time we rented it out, it was right at $1,000. So we were already over the 1% rule, or right about, after we put money into it. And then we refied out of it, and we got infinite return and plus 20,000. So basically the bank gave us all the money that we had. I think we got $120,000 back out of it. So we ended up paying for the house, all the renovations, and had like $10,000 in the bank account. And we're just like, the bank just paid us $10,000 to own this property. And that was like a mind blowing moment. And so we had two single families that we did that on. One was 72,000, the other one was 80,000. The $80,000 one, we didn't have any money because we were busy putting money in other places. So we went to our friends. We have friends here in Seattle who we knew had money in different investments that they could pull out. And we knew that hard money at the time, right? Hard money was about 10%
Sure.
interest. And we were saying, so we went to our friends and we said, hey, instead of paying some hard money lender 10%, what if we just pay you 10%? You give us 80,000. A year from now, we'll give you back $88,000. Like you're going to get 10% and it'll be at least, give us a year. It probably isn't going to take that long, but let's just say it's a year. And this is how we set up. Even if we finish before a year, we're still going to give you $88,000.
I love it.
And so we were able to do that. It took us about 10 months. And again, we cash out refied into it. And the bank paid us like $17,000 to own this house. And we're just like, my gosh. Now, to be fair, those are the only two infinite returns we had. But again, it was a time and place in history where
Sure.
you could still find an $80,000 house in Spokane. That is really hard to find now, even some that
Yes.
are in really rough shape. It's really hard to find those, right? So it was a moment in time and we were able to take advantage of that. And then we just kept doing the same thing. The rest of them haven't been infinite return, but
Mhm.
we do pretty darn well where we've got, $9,000 to $10,000, maybe $25,000 left in the property of our own cash in the property after we refi out. So it's pretty good return on investment by the time you get done.
I'm just curious if so you kept them as rentals. Do you know what they had to kind of cash flow every month for it to make sense to you to hold them as rentals?
Yeah. So when we start out, our goal always has been they need to cash flow $200 per door. That's
Okay.
always our goal. Now, one time we cash out refied and we took as much cash out as we could on the refi, and they only cash flowed. I think they started at about $170 per door,
Mhm.
but we were okay with that because it's a long-term game. Those
Right.
same units today are now cash flowing, I don't know, $700 per door. So it
Yeah.
was a short term, but we still got all the cash out. And this is when interest rates were low, so they're locked in at 3%. And so we saw that, and so we were able to say, okay, we're going to take a little bit less on the cash flow, knowing that rents are going to continue to increase, but we're locked in at 3%. And that's the nice thing. Once you're locked in, and like a lot of people did, locked in at 3 or 3.5%, your baseline is set. Like that number is not going to move other than property taxes, and you just can rock and roll from there as rents increase.
So were you able to get all your 9 properties into long-term fixed low interest rate debt?
Yeah, we are between 3 and 3.5% on all of
Wow.
them.
That
Yeah.
is
That's
awesome.
pretty impressive. Wow. And that's 18 properties under 4%.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is part of it, right? We found a bank that was able, and that included our house that I am in now, our primary house. We did a full 3-floor remodel on this during the pandemic. And so we were refining out of our house as well, or refining this house as well. And we found a bank that was able to do it all at the same time. So all those credits didn't hit and see it all. So it was amazing. The notary shows up at our house, and it took us 3.5 hours to sign all the paperwork because they all closed on exactly the same day. And so I think we
Yeah.
ended up we refied 7 or 8 properties. I think 8. Yeah, 8 properties, and then our primary. So we did 9 properties all on the same day. They all closed, and so it all hit at the same time.
Oh, wow.
But we found a bank that was willing to work with us, and that's part of it, right? Finding your partners, knowing who your partners are, and
Sure.
making it work.
That's a lot of paperwork.
It was a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
Jeff, I was gonna say that sounds like a major headache,
Yeah,
honestly,
it
but
was a
you
ton of
did it.
paperwork.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
it was
did that once on a smaller scale. I refinanced 4 properties at the same time, but yeah, just going through all that paperwork. I remember I was going as fast as I could, just try to make a world record or something like that, and it still took almost a half hour to get through all 4 files.
I was worried we're going to miss one.
Mhm.
I was just like,
Yeah.
if we miss one paper in this and something gets held up, that one property, they're going to come back and say, yeah, but your debt to income just went up to 80%. I was like, yes, for a small point in time, it's going to be out of control. But as soon as the rents come in, it drops back down. But you're right. It looks really bad right now.
So when you did all those at once, you were able to cash out refi on all those then? How much cash did you pull out, if you don't mind talking to us about that?
I'm trying to think.
Just give us an estimate. Yeah, it doesn't have to be exact.
By the time it was all done, I think we were able to, I don't know, pay off a bunch of the property, like, pay off. I think we ended up with probably close to $200,000 in cash. plus all the rehab because we had our HELOC pulled out at that time because we'd been rehabbing stuff. So we had, $500,000 HELOC that was almost limited out. So we paid off the HELOC and had about $200,000 in cash.
And your cash and your rentals are still cash flowing, correct?
And our rentals are still cash flowing, and we live in a beautiful, renovated 3-floor house that, like everybody's goal, our first goal was to pay off our mortgage every month. And when we refied this house, we dropped we were at 4.5%. And when we refied, we're down to 3% on our primary house. And so it all worked out. And yeah, now we live free up here on Queen Anne with beautiful views of mountains and water, and our rentals pay for it.
Awesome. So I know, so every time I did like the Burr strategy and got a good, cash out refi, chunk of money, 100 grand here, 150 here. I have this problem. I just got to spend the money right away. Do you have any issue? How long does that kind of money sit in your bank account? Like, do you save any of it, or do you just reallocate it and start investing in something new?
That's a really good question. We try to play both sides of it. Right now we've got some from our last cash out refi. We've got money sitting. And right now it's our backup money because we depleted everything last summer when we were refinancing. So it's our backup. We like to keep about, if in my head, if all of our renters move out and we still have to pay mortgages, I got 3 months that I can cover all the mortgages. That's my backup plan, right? Which for us, our mortgages come into about, I don't know, 12, including our primary, we're going to be right around like $18,000 a month. So 18,000 times 3, I keep that in kind of a coffer. And so we make sure that we have that. And then any money on top of that, we start looking at, okay, how do we invest it? What it's going to do? Hey, we will, and yes, we celebrate. We will take some of that money and say, you know what? We just worked our butts off all summer laying LVP flooring and
Sure.
redoing all of these things. We need to go to Cancun for a week, and so we will do that. We will take a trip and we will travel. And last summer we went to Croatia with our goddaughter. This summer we're going to Spain with the other goddaughter. So, we love to travel. And
So back up for a second. Did you say you spent all summer like laying down flooring? Were you doing the work on these houses yourself?
oh, we do a ton of the work ourselves. Yeah. So
Oh man, Jeff.
my wife does all the tiling, and we do we lay all the LVP flooring ourselves.
Okay, while you're working a job.
Yes, while I'm traveling around the world, also consulting full time for school districts. So it's in between all that stuff, which, yeah. So, but I mean, it saves us a ton of money. Just those two things. We have a contractor that does everything else. But every time we lay LVP flooring, I'm going to guess it saves us somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000.
Sure.
And
Okay.
and here's the thing, my wife and I, we love doing it together.
Yeah.
We go in, we'll spend 4 days, and we have fun, and
Yeah.
we don't mind doing it. And it's not overly difficult
Mhm.
to lay LVP flooring. It's time consuming, but for $6,000 to $10,000, we can do it. My wife does all the tiling. Part of it is because she loves making things look pretty, and so she wants to buy a little more expensive tile. So our units don't just have white subway. They've got all these cool, and she finds discount tile, and then she installs it all herself.
Nice.
And so we were able to make our units look a little more unique. Like we shower, almost all of our showers are tiled showers. We don't do very many plastic surrounds. And part of that is plastic surrounds leak, plastic surrounds will break. But when you tile and grout a shower, that sucker's there forever, and you don't have to worry about it. We reg guard it, like we do the whole thing. And she gets to make it look pretty, which is what fills her bucket. So, and we save money. And those are the two things that we do ourselves, and then manage the contractors over top of that.
Do you guys manage your own rentals as well?
No, we have a property manager, so that's worked in, on typical 10%
Mm-hmm.
on the property management side, and that's all in our numbers. That's worked in from the very beginning.
Perfect.
We've got a property manager that oversees everything and keeps everything going on and makes sure that things go well. And then my wife, manages the property manager. So
Yep.
I
Someone's
just
got
need
to manage the
somebody to do it.
managers for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna say a little bit more on that. So with the property management, you have that going for you. You're doing your own tile, you're doing your own LVP, and again, you can either save your time or money on that. It sounds like you guys are having a really fun time with that, and you're making it something you enjoy, and you're putting your own personal touches on it. I think that's really cool, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage your time, doing your full time job and doing these other projects as well? Like, don't you feel like you get overexerted a little bit?
Yeah, there are times,
Hmm.
but I think part of it is I call it an entrepreneurial mindset. When you're going to start a business, and again, I've been entrepreneurial. I have not had a quote unquote W-2 job since 2012.
Hmm.
I made the jump in 2012. And when you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you have to understand that you can look at your calendar, and there's going to be times where you are exhausted. There's going to be times in your life, this was me back in 2014, I traveled 250,000 miles in a year. I had two passports. Most people don't even know that the US government will give you two passports because one of them was getting visas while I was traveling. My wife twice had to drive to the airport and swap me passports so that I could jump back on a plane,
Wow.
right? Like, I mean, there are times, and it doesn't matter what the job is. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a business owner, there are times where like you're grinding, but then you can also set your own schedule and say, no, for these 2 weeks, we're going to go to Croatia. For this week, this summer, we're taking our goddaughter to Spain. And you can do that in your schedule. And that's what people want, right? That's the goal. But on the other side of that, yeah, you're grinding it out. We're putting in 16-hour days this summer, laying LVP flooring in 4 different properties at the same time, because we've got to get these things back on the market so we can get renters in them. And so you have to understand that. The one thing that I always tell entrepreneurs when they're getting started, anybody starting a business, you have to be comfortable in living in 6-month increments. That's step number one, right? The difference between having a W-2 job or having a job where you are an employee is there's this comfort in that no matter what happens, I don't even have to be my best self this month. At the end of the month, I'm going to get a check. When you're an entrepreneur, if you can cover your expenses for 6 months, you're doing really well. And that's all you worry about. You worry about this 6 months, and then you worry about the next 6 months. And for some reason, if you can get into a mindset where you can grind in 6 month increments, the next 6 months somehow just takes care of itself. Like you just grind it out. Um, and that's always the first thing I say to anybody who wants to start their business. Like, okay, you've got to get out of this monthly mindset
Hmm.
or this yearly mindset. You've got to look at 6 months. How do you make enough money to live for 6 months, to do what you want to do for 6 months? And then you just keep working in 6 month increments. Otherwise, you get frustrated or you get stressed out that you don't have enough money this month. And, there's months where, even as a consultant, I only made $2,000. Well, that's not going to do it. But the next month I make $15,000. And so you've got to be able to look at it, right? And be able to just make sure that you're covering your expenses in about 6 month increments.
Nice. So Jeff, I'm really curious. Do you mind taking us through your day? Because you sound like a very busy guy, but you're able to accomplish a lot. And I believe that if you just get into the right habits or routines on a daily basis, you'll get into this groove where you could be like virtually unstoppable. But I'm really curious with how much you have going on. Do you have like a routine calendar that you follow, or these daily habits that you follow throughout the day to get everything done?
Mm. That's a really good question. I think because I have so many irons in the fire, um, I don't, it's really hard to get a full routine going on. Um, but I do have goals that I set for myself. And I think that to me is what I'm always constantly striving for. For example, my goal every month is to work out at least 60% of the time, right? And so like this morning, I was running a little bit late because my workout went a little bit early, but I had this podcast at 9:30. I work backwards and I get out of bed and I work out and I got that done for the day. And I love working out first thing in the morning. It works for me. Um, I like to, it's hard for me again to have a schedule because I've got multiple things going on. I run 2 other podcasts. I run a consulting firm. I'm doing online trainings. I'm driving to places. And so I don't really have a daily schedule, but I do try to have mental moments where I can look at my schedule, plan things out, try to keep all the cogs turning. Um, my wife is incredible at supporting me and all that. I think a lot of people hire, and again, because she, oversees the real estate business, she takes a lot of that stuff on, but she's also an assistant to my other stuff. She's booking flights to the Philippines for me because I have a job in the Philippines. She's overseeing our calendar to make sure things are going on. So one of the first people I would hire is a virtual assistant. Try to get somebody that can help take some of those day-to-day tasks off for you. Much like podcasting, I'm sure you two have found when you have a co-host, it lightens both everybody's load a little bit. And so
Sure.
I've got a
Yeah.
co-host. I've got another consultant that I work with that helps to lighten that load a little bit.
Hmm.
And that's where this idea of partnerships comes in. The
Yeah.
more that you can partner with people to help kind of keep you going, um, I think that's the main key.
Sure.
The other thing that I do is I try to get all of my meetings in 1 or 2 days a week.
Gotcha.
So I don't like to stretch out all my meetings. So today is a podcasting day. I'm podcasting with you. I've got 2 other podcasts later today.
You're
Like today's
rolling.
podcasting day. Tomorrow I've got 5 meetings. Tomorrow's meeting day. And then I'm done. The rest of the time I'm working. I'm
Yeah.
writing, I'm editing, I'm looking at properties. I'm right now getting taxes, uh, getting taxes going. I've got other time, but I try to say, you know what? Okay, so this week, and every week it changes, but this week, Monday's podcast day, Tuesday's meeting day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is time for me to get down, get focused, and get the stuff done I need to get done. So
Awesome. So I think like what you said earlier, you mentioned like having the right partner to try to help you, maybe hold yourself accountable or, pick up the ball where maybe you're not savvy enough in a certain area. But like we've experienced that with Jeremy. Um, like I did this podcast by myself and Jeremy was more just kind of helping setting things up back the first couple of years, but it was not consistent. Um, and because I didn't have anybody else there to kind of co-host the thing with me and
right,
somebody else's schedule to rely on. But now that Jeremy and I are doing it together, it's gotten so much easier, more consistent, fun. And
yeah,
it's just now it's on the calendar and not just we'll fill it in when I have time. Um, so I think having the right partners really help. And I had that in my real estate sales business. I co-run a team with Joe Turner, but for the first half of the decade of my being a real estate agent, I didn't really have anybody that I had to hold accountable or anybody on the other end of that. And now I do. So like we have these weekly meetings. She does what she's supposed to be good at. I do what I'm good at. And it just works. It doesn't work with every partnership, but with the right partnerships, you can get a lot done.
yeah.
So
And there's an accountability piece, right? You're
yeah,
accountable to somebody else. I think about that. I was just at a conference and one of my good friends was there presenting as well. And we both wanted to work out the next morning, but we both were kind of like hemming and hawing. And I finally just looked at him. I said, "What time are you going to be in the gym?" And he goes,
yeah,
6:30. And I was like, "I'm going to be there." And now we both had to set our alarms. We had to get there because if you didn't want, somebody was waiting on you being there at 6:30. And so that's the same thing with partnerships, right? Like you set up a partnership, you get somebody else that thinks like you, that, can support you and you can support them. And now you're held accountable and now things move. It's a way to hold yourself accountable for sure.
yeah, totally. With that gym example, just a few months ago, I decided I was going to hire a trainer for 2 months because I know it takes on average about 60, 70 days to get a habit going to where it's just things are just natural for you. So I kind of got out of the habit of going to the gym regularly. And I decided I'm going to hire a personal trainer 3 days a week, 6 a.m. and I have to be
Yeah.
there because I'm paying this
You
guy
have to be there.
$400 a month,
Hmm.
and I'm
Yeah.
not just going to leave him hanging. So and I did it for a little over 2 months, and I just got in the habit. I don't need him anymore because I just my body just it's a natural habit for me to go in the gym like
Hmm.
3 days a week. So yeah, I like what you said.
That's awesome. This is a good transition piece. Jeff, I know obviously Nick and I went to one of your REI presentations. I think it was called Mindset Matters or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. And speaking of mindset and habits, like, do you have any good advice for people to stay in a good entrepreneurial mindset or to build really good habits?
Yeah, so this is a lot of the work I do everywhere. But this idea of mindsets, there's 2 types of mindsets, and I'm sure many people, you can look this up. Carol DeWick is the researcher behind this, and you can look her up on. She's got a TED Talk, and books out and everything else about a growth mindset. But I think, especially as an entrepreneur, it's very easy to you don't know everything about running a business your first time in. And so how do you stay in a mindset where you are thinking about, okay, well, I don't know this, and the word that I use, and this comes strictly from Carol Dweck, is just add the word "yet" to the end of things. It's a great way of thinking about it. And the thing to understand is, when we talk about mindsets, not everybody has 100% growth mindset, and not everybody has 100% fixed mindset. And I'll just use video games. There's a lot of people that play video games with a growth mindset. As soon as their character dies, they're like, oh, that didn't work. They try it again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that didn't work. They try it again. That's a growth mindset, right? You figure something out. That didn't work. You take a step back and go, oh, that's interesting. That didn't go the way I thought I would.
Sure.
And then you try again. That's a growth mindset. And you can do that in business as well. What you don't want to get into is what I do is I go to the refrigerator. I open up the refrigerator, and the refrigerator can be stocked full with food. I mean,
Mhm.
my wife could have just gotten back from the grocery store. I open the refrigerator and I'll say, there's nothing here to eat. Right?
Yeah.
That's a fixed mindset.
Mhm.
The mindset is I'm not looking at it. I'm not trying to plan out what should I do. I open it up and I'm like, well, I don't know what to do with this. And if I don't know what to do with it, then I'm not, no. Versus there's nothing to eat in here yet, but if I take those eggs and mix it with that kale and throw all that in a smoothie, then, next thing I know, I'm barbecuing steak with potatoes and got a salad. But if you just look at it, sometimes it's very easy to get overwhelmed and get yourself into a fixed mindset. And when we're talking about being an entrepreneur, it's about understanding that you don't need to know everything now, but you have to be open to learning it. And that's where a growth mindset comes in. I don't know this yet, or I need to go learn something tomorrow, right? And you get into this mindset of, well, and every time something happens, instead of being, oh my gosh, I just failed, can you step back and say, oh my gosh, that was interesting. What did I learn from that? And how do I apply that in my next property? How do I apply that the next time that comes up? You know, um, I think that's like, how do you, the idea of a growth mindset is to constantly looking at situations through a learning lens. What can I learn from that situation? Right? What can I learn from this conversation? We're here having a conversation. This is my professional learning. What am I learning from this? I've got a notebook down. I'm writing down even the questions you're asking me. It's like, oh, that's a great question that I want to spend some more time on.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Like there's like you're learning focused on something that you're passionate about.
I love that. That's really good. I think a problem nowadays is a lot of people want an answer and they want it instantaneously.
Oh, for sure.
Like you were talking about with your fridge analogy, like, right, there was nothing directly available that you
That's
could
right.
do right now that would fill your hunger. But if you learn to problem solve a little bit and
Yeah.
just wrap your head around what exactly it is that you need, you will go far further.
That's right. I love that.
Good stuff, definitely. I want to talk a little bit more about your portfolio too. So you've been doing multifamily as well as single family, correct?
Yeah. Mostly multifamily. We've got a couple single families, but
Mhm.
mostly duplexes and a fourplex.
2 duplex and a fourplex. Have you found it any different, or obviously your property managers manage these, but have you found it any different dealing with any of the multifamily properties versus the single family properties?
That's a really good question. I don't know if we found anything different.
Mhm.
I think, we've got one single family that we got done renovating it. Uh, and that was it. We haven't had to really touch it again.
Okay.
The other single family, it's just been like, it's one thing after another with this. And it's a 1908 house.
Mhm.
So put that on top of it. Like, it's just,
It's going to have problems.
It's got great bones, but it's got issues.
It's going to have problems
You
in
know?
character, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think part of that is just, anything with single family, as you know,
Mhm.
is either you're at 100% occupancy or you're at 0% occupancy.
Yep.
There's no in between with single family. And that's one of the things that we're really starting to focus in on, is how do we move into duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and I would love to go more than that. But just because of that idea, when we're renovating a duplex, we can renovate one unit at a time and still have enough income coming in from one of the units to cover the mortgage or cover costs while we're renovating another at that time. Versus, your single families, you're either at 100% or at 0, and there's no in between.
Yeah. So Jeff, I heard you speak a year or two ago at a conference in Spokane, or a meetup of Vet Wiley's meetup, and I remember you saying, I think you said that your wife just wouldn't let you buy a newer house and she
Yeah.
just loves older homes. Does she still love older homes or
Yes.
with them as rental? Okay. Cuz that was
Yeah.
one thing that like the hairs just like stood up on the back of my neck and I was just like, "Oh, how long you been doing this?"
Yeah.
Cuz
Yeah,
I'm just
I
joking.
know. And
Just
this is part of it. My wife and I were partners in the real estate, and really she should be the one on the podcast, but she hates doing these things, so it ends up always being me.
Gotcha.
Um, but that's what fills her bucket,
Mhm.
yeah.
and it's always I would love for us to have a 10 or 12 unit apartment complex. And she goes, but I don't want 10 units that all look the same. And I'm like, but you could do different tile
Yeah.
backsplashes in all of them, but that's not enough for her, right?
Mhm.
She loves the character. She loves figuring out how to make them, look the best. And that's what fills her bucket.
Sure.
And so, we're in this together. And so we constantly look at things through that lens. Now, that's not saying we'll never. I mean, there's a beautiful old brick building that just came up in Spokane that's a 12 unit that I'm like,
There
how
we
do we
go.
swing that? Like
Yeah.
that's old.
Yeah,
It's got
it's
a
old.
ton of
It's brick.
character. I might be able to talk her into that one.
Yeah.
So, you
Get
know,
yourself a nice little commercial
Right
loan and
on.
get your 12 unit on. I love it.
exactly. I know. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, and not all of ours are old. I mean, some of ours are, I mean, I don't know what you consider old. Some are 1970s, I think is our newest one. Um,
I'd consider that
but
old still, to be honest with you.
okay, all right. I don't know.
Anything that has lead-based paint is probably old.
Yeah, well, there you go. If you have to worry about asbestos siding and
Yep.
lead-based paint, then we consider it old.
That's my
Yeah.
go-to, I think.
So Jeff, I'm curious, have you and your wife considered not buying any more properties at all? Because if you just write it out, and then eventually all these things are going to get paid off, you guys are going to be sitting pretty well with what you have, right?
Yeah, it is such a good, Nick, that is such a good question. And I will say we are in that spot right now where do we have to invest? Probably not.
Mhm.
We know that rents are increasing. Our rents are still increasing for the most part. We're kind of I mean, when we're kind of leveling off right now. We had somebody move out and somebody move back in at the same rate. Um, I mean, we're still saying when we have a tenant move out, we're usually got somebody moving in within weeks, if not within the month, because there's still a housing shortage in Spokane. We're not seeing the crazy increases that we were seeing last summer,
Mhm.
but to your point, we're sitting at a place where pretty much if we watch our personal finances, it can actually pay for our personal finances, and then that is freeing me up on my consulting end, which I've been full-time consulting since 2012.
Mhm.
I don't have to take every gig. If I don't want to go to Wyoming, I don't go to Wyoming. I don't feel that pressure to have to go and do things.
Right.
Or this opportunity came up for a school wanted me to come to the Philippines. An international school was like, "Hey, we'd love to have you here for a week in the Philippines." And I looked at my wife and said, "They're paying for me. We'll pay your ticket." And now we've got a vacation
Nice.
and I get to do some consulting. Um, and so other people are paying for our travel and our consulting because we built up our real estate portfolio to a place where it pretty close will cover our monthly expenses. And so, Nick, it is a question we ask ourselves all the time. Do we have to? No. Do we like doing it? Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we're not in a pressure. Like right now, we're not actively looking. We don't feel like we have to. If the right property lands in our lap, yeah, we will. But we're not. We're past the having to go out and seek them out and grow. We
Sure.
we we did that over the last 5 to 6 years and put ourselves in a pretty good position to be where we're at.
Which 5-6 years, that's not much time
Mhm.
in real
No,
estate. So
yeah.
I commend you for building it up that quick.
My wife and I, when we do something, it's full on.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what we do. We go 1,000% because we can see that, right?
Mhm.
We can see life's going to be insane for this amount of time, and then we threw a pandemic in there, which we weren't expecting.
Sure.
Life's going to be insane for this amount of time, but we can see tunnels out the other end.
Mhm.
That's just part of our mindset.
I love it. You guys have been grinding and you've been doing a lot of really cool things. Do you have any horror stories, Jeff, from any of your investments where anything just went completely wrong or awry? And if you do, what did you learn from it?
That's a really good question. I would say our first flip was probably our
Okay.
biggest learning.
Mhm.
We thought we found this beautiful old house up on the South Hill in Spokane. Great neighborhood for those of you that don't know Spokane. Great neighborhood. Uh, got this house at, we believed, a steal of a price. 19, I want to say it was like a 1920 kind of farmhousey kind of look. And my wife was salivating over it, of course. We go in and we just knocked it out of the park. Like new paint, new flooring, gorgeous finishes, not over the top, but just, really nice. At the same time, the market in Spokane started just going through the roof, and we're just like, oh my gosh, we're just going to kill it on this property. And we were getting ready to list it, and we listed it, and we were supposed to make, I think, like $60,000 profit, and it didn't sell, and it didn't sell, and it didn't sell. We dropped it. It didn't sell. It didn't sell. It didn't sell. And we're like, what in the world's going on? Everything is selling. What's wrong? What is going on? We had it staged. So we're just like, what in the world is going on? And the feedback kept coming back that they didn't like that it had a cedar shingle roof.
Oh.
Now, the roof was probably had 5-6 years left on it. It was in good shape. It didn't need to be replaced. But we learned a valuable lesson. When people want turnkey, they want turnkey. So we ended up pulling it off the market, pulling off all of the shingles. We then found out that it had no sheathing because, of course, it was built in 1912 or something like that. So basically had to redo an entire roof. Of course, that led to other things that were wrong in the attic. Had to blow insulation in. There goes our $60,000 profit. And by the time we get it all put back together, we get it back on the market, I think we ended up losing right around $100 on it. Like we got pretty close to breaking even. But we went, basically, it cost us about 60 grand, and we just didn't know. It was our first flip. The contractor, everybody told us, like, the roof's in good shape. I wouldn't replace the roof. So we didn't replace the roof.
Sure.
And it ended up biting us in the end, and that was like a valuable lesson. When people want turnkey on the flipping side, they want turnkey.
100%.
So Jeff, I'm curious. So that could have been avoided if you got the right advice to swap those shingles out. Curious, did anybody else tell you should be replacing that roof, or did anybody else tell you that roof was fine?
Everybody told us the roof was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Nobody brought it up except the buyers.
Wow.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just everybody that would walk through, they loved the house. They thought it was beautiful. It just sold again. It just hit the market and sold within 5 days.
Oh, wow.
We still follow it. And I don't know, I think they bought it for $320 and they just sold it for $450. So that's not too bad in 5 years or whatever in Spokane.
Not bad.
4 years. But it was the buyers. The buyers were they didn't like the roof.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was just their agents were saying, see if you can get them to replace the roof, because it was a cedar shingle roof. That's just going out of style and
went out of style in 1912.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I think that's important though. You got to take the right advice from the right people. Because I mean, if I was there and I'm not saying that I'm brilliant or anything, but I would have caught that immediately. Just working with plenty of buyers and knowing that if anything's confusing to a buyer, they don't buy. And an old cedar roof just means this has to be replaced to a buyer. That's all they think, and they don't have the means or the money. And when you're going to flip a property, it has to be perfect for a buyer. It has to be a no-brainer almost always. If you're renting that house out, a renter wouldn't care as long as it wasn't leaking.
Yeah. I mean, they don't care, because if it leaks, you, the homeowner, have to fix it.
It's your problem again. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably good. But you're absolutely right. And we learned that lesson.
Yeah.
And it was buyers' agents who were the ones saying, you know what, you're right, you should probably replace that. And so we ended up having to replace it and getting it off our books. And, by the time we had, it's like everything, in real estate, we had holding costs then for an extra 4 months.
So you were on hard money,
We
right?
bought it with hard money.
Yep.
And so, there was another 10 grand just in holding costs. So for 4 months or whatever it was. And then the actual having to find a contract company to come in on a rush, because we didn't want to wait 4 weeks or 6 weeks. We're paying extra to rush it because this sucker's supposed to be for sale already. And now we're having to rip the roof off. It was just a bunch of things that caught us. And to your point, if we'd have known it from the beginning, we could have worked it into the budget. We'd have worked it into the plan. Our contractor would have had guys out there. It wouldn't have cost us what it ended up costing us. We could have done it inside the time frame that we would have been able to, that we had set up, but we didn't know. And so we learned a valuable lesson.
And going to kind of play intermediary between you both. Obviously, Nick said, I would have caught it immediately. Jeff, this was your first flip, and you don't know
Yeah.
what you don't know, right?
You don't know what you don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, especially
Yeah.
on your first flip, like, why would I replace a roof when it seems to be in good working condition?
Yep.
And this is something I'm taking from both of you. Yeah. Like, I'm taking from both of you. Like, I've never had to deal with a cedar roof. Now, hearing both of you, I'm going to be on the lookout for
There
it.
you
So
go.
again, that's a good takeaway for me.
Well, the only reason I know that is because I've been a real estate agent for 12 years now, and I've shown thousands of
There you
buyers I've walked thousands of buyers through properties, and I get their feedback. And that's what really helped me. I did that for 5 years before I ever flipped my first house. So I got to know what a buyer would expect in a flip. What I didn't realize is that renters weren't as picky. So I always did everything that you wouldn't do for a flip
So
for a
true.
rental property.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
did a lot of unnecessary repairs all the time. But you don't
Yeah.
know what you don't know.
And see, we learned our lesson. That was our first
Yeah,
property.
right.
We didn't replace the roof. The next 3 that we flipped, first thing we did was replace the roof on all 3 of
There
them.
you go.
It didn't matter. Like, we were just like, yep, that looks really bad.
Yeah.
Replace the roof.
I don't care if it has 6 years left on it. Let's
Yeah.
get a brand new 30-year roof on that thing.
Yep. And it made all the difference. Every other property, we hit our numbers or surpassed our numbers. And we took that lesson, and instead of being in a fixed mindset of we don't know how to make money flipping a house,
Mhm.
we went, that was interesting. What did we learn?
Yeah.
It was still cheaper than a university degree.
Right.
Yeah.
My wife and I both have master's degrees, and we're like, we just learned more on one flip that cost us a third of what we paid for our bachelor's, not let alone every other, degree we had to have. And look how much we learned. And then we turned around and we crushed it on the next 3 homes,
So Jeff, speaking of degrees, can I play devil's advocate a little bit here on extended education beyond high school for entrepreneurs? So I'm just guessing, but I know a lot of people that go through college, they end up making more money than those that don't, right? Is it possible that the people that went through college were going to make more money regardless because those are the kind of people that want to better themselves, educate themselves, and go on to do good things in life? Is college really the answer?
Well, that's a really good question. And I don't know if I don't know of any statistics out there that will say that. But, college is one path. And I think one of the things that I'm constantly focused on my education, so you're going to get me on my education soapbox here.
Love
for a
it.
second.
No, and that's why I want to spark.
One of the things that we talk about in education is preparing kids for college, career, and life. And those are 3 different things: college, comma, career, comma, life, comma, and everything else that comes after that. Now, college is one path for a lot of people, and college can mean a lot of different things. When we think of college, it doesn't have to be 4 years. What we're looking at right now, especially right now, is we're looking at roughly 400,000 workers short in just the construction industry. And that's a 2-year degree. You don't have to go to a 4-year university and go hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Go to your community college. Almost every community college, we have the top community college in the world is right here in America that is available to people at very, very low prices. And depending on where you live, it can be free. Your state will actually pay for it. Here in the state of Washington, we're lucky enough. The state of Washington will pay for you to go to community college if you are in certain certificate programs. So think about that for a second. But you're right, Nick, it's a mindset. How do I better myself from where I'm at? How do I understand that learning is what drives you forward, right? That drive of how do I get to the next place that I want to be, and just thinking through, okay, I love your idea of a P&L. What's my profit and losses, right? Right now, I'm giving my time and energy to learning this course or doing the work. You come out of high school, go get an internship, right? Go get an internship and start hauling bricks or start making retaining walls. It doesn't matter what it is. Go paint, haul paint buckets. All of that is your time and energy in learning something. Sitting around playing video games isn't a skill set that most people need.
Nick,
Okay,
did you want to
fine.
expand on that anymore? Or you're good.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad you gave that answer.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm just curious coming from your background. Obviously, I don't have any background in education. I just went through high school, and then my college education, I got a Pell Grant. I think it was a Pell Grant.
Yeah.
I went and took guitar lessons, mountaineering, wilderness survival, digital photography, and snowboarding. Those were the
There you go.
classes I took in college. So clearly, I'm not an academic kind of guy. But I know a lot of people that did go through college, a lot of my peers, a lot of my friends, and they didn't come back that successful. A lot of them struggled through life and really didn't go as far as I thought they would. And it's just been an observation, and maybe it's just what I observed, and it's not really the case in real world. But it just didn't seem like college is the answer for everybody.
College isn't the answer for everybody. And I hope people are hearing me say that. College is not the answer for everybody.
Hmm.
What is the answer for everybody is having the right mindset, right?
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's lucky enough or fortunate enough or just the person that I am. I am a risk taker. And Nick, it sounds like you're taking snowboarding classes. Like I'm not strapping my feet to a board and going down a hill. You'll
Hmm.
never get to see me do that.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. But you're a risk taker, right? Like you've got some kind of risk taking that you are allowed to do within whatever you are comfortable with taking risks in. I have always been that way. I have been I am somebody that you don't want to say, hey, what if we go and do that? Because I'll probably make you go and do it. My wife, I don't know, 20 some years ago, like we'd only been married 2 years, was like, I want to go teach overseas. And I'm like, great, let's go teach overseas. We ended up in Saudi Arabia for 3 years, and we taught for 10 years overseas. And just because, she would have, my wife's the type of person that she would have researched, and probably never have done it because she doesn't like to take big risks. I'm the opposite. I don't hardly do any research and I just go do things. So we balance each other out that way. But that idea of taking risks, right? Like you've got to get to a point where, you know what? What's the worst that happens? The worst that happens is I lose $5,000. Can I live with that? I'm strapping my feet to a board and going down a hill. What's the worst that can happen? I break a knee. Am I okay with that?
Oh,
Yeah.
there's a lot worse that can happen.
Yeah, but you're making mental decisions, right? You're making
Mhm.
mental decisions around risk and your risk tolerance. And I think it's something we don't talk about enough of what is your risk tolerance. And some people don't,
Mhm.
and that's fine. If you don't like to take risks, then find a job or find a career that there are very few
Mhm.
risk-taking opportunities.
Yeah.
But if you want to be in real estate, you better have a risky mindset because you're going to have to buy a house that maybe just is a little too expensive, or you're going to have to go do something that just is just a little bit out of your comfort zone. But also in taking risks are opportunities. That's where opportunities lie, or on the edge of risk taking.
Right. 100%.
Out of everything I know, I feel like real estate is the least risky thing you can possibly do, depending
Mhm.
on how you go about it. But it seems so predictable long term, and unless you're flipping houses, and doing short term plays, and but if you're just trying to buy a house to live in or buy a house to rent it out, it just seems like almost like there's no risk at all. You're more. I think it's more risky to be a renter
Hmm.
and feel like you're going to be fine living in one place. You're never going to be told to move out, and your rent's always going to stay the same. It's just not real. But anyway, I don't feel like real estate has to be that risky.
It doesn't, but you also have knowledge around
Right.
it. So it's
Yeah.
not risky for you now.
Yeah. Your
You know?
first year in it, it was obviously risky because you were a buyer's agent. You didn't have a pool of buyers in front of you, Nick. You had to figure it out, and that's what the risk was, you figuring it out. And just kind of playing off both of you here a little bit.
Oh, well, if you mean by becoming a real estate agent, yes,
Mhm.
ton of risk. I mean,
Sure.
you have better odds of being a Navy SEAL than you do
Sure.
making it in real estate for 2 years.
But I'm saying, like, since you were an agent, it gave you the tools to better yourself as an investor as well.
Sure.
Would you agree?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just mean investing in real estate long term doesn't seem risky to me, and I just don't think I still don't think it's risky to the average person.
Sure.
I agree with you. I just don't think the average person understands what that risk
Right.
is. And we don't teach it. We don't teach anything about real estate unless you are interested in it and you want to go out and seek it out for yourself. Nowhere is there any education around, hey, let's look at the stock market versus real estate.
Sure.
We just say, and like even in schools, a lot of kids today will do a like you can do all of these stock market games
Hmm.
where you can pretend buy stocks and you can see how your stocks do. And we do that in school, but we never do in school. Hey, let's play Monopoly and actually understand the game of
Right.
Monopoly on what is happening here when you actually buy real land,
Hmm.
right? When you buy an investment. We don't cover that side of it. We just say put a 401k. I love reading the articles. I get articles all the time in my news feed that are, should I max out my 401k? And always they're like, yes, you're putting in 15%, your company's putting in 5%, you should do that. And I'm like, yeah, because that's what we told everybody to do. So you should still do that. And then I read this another article that says, I've got $450,000 in the bank and I'm 72 years old. Can I retire yet?
Right.
And I'm like, ouch.
I think a lot of what this comes down to too is people's money mindset. Honestly, I know we're running a
So
little bit
true.
long over the hour mark here, so we're going to try to wrap this up eventually, but it's the money mindset, especially with school and real estate. Like, real estate investing, it is risky to people who don't understand it and they don't have money because they think it takes money to do it. And obviously,
Yeah.
we all know it does not take money. It takes somebody's money. Not it doesn't have to be yours.
Doesn't have to be my money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, we are kind of getting a little bit long on the
Yeah, let's
show
wrap it up.
here. We're I try to be over under an hour. Our editors don't like it under that. So, Jeff, real quick, what is your 5-year plan or goals going forward?
5-year plan going forward. Our goal is to be fully retired at 55. We are currently
Okay.
46. That is the goal we set for ourselves over 10 years ago.
Okay.
And we make a lot of our decisions based on that. So our goal moving forward is just that. How do we put ourselves into a position,
Hmm.
know what you need to retire, know how much money you want to have to retire, and then we are putting ourselves in a position to do that. We do invest in stocks. We do have retirement funds. We also have a lot of money in real estate. We are very diverse. We are also entrepreneurs by trade. We don't have a W-2 job. My wife, again, quit hers in 2018. That was our last one. And here's what I also know. I know that the majority, and I forget what the actual number is, somebody can go look it up. I think it's like 62 or 70% of millionaires have 7 different streams of income,
Yep.
right? Real estate is one of our streams. And my consulting is one of our streams. And I run another online business where we sell courses is another one of my streams. Like, how do you get yourself multiple streams of income to get to where you want to be? And that could even be if you have a W-2 job. What are your multiple streams of income? It might be one rental property is a stream of income. Start with that. So our plan is that's our plan. Our plan is to be retired fully at age 55 and travel the world. And we have traveled the world. We are at 56 countries and counting. And that's what we love to do. And so that is part of the plan.
I love it. That's good stuff, Jeff. So before we get into the final wind down, obviously, I just want to say real quick, like it has been so cool talking to you about your real estate journey and about your mindset and just about who you are and what you're doing. I get a lot of enjoyment out of this, and hopefully our guests do as well, or hopefully our listeners do as well. With the wind down questions, we obviously sent you an email of these, but if you had one business or investing book you recommend every single person read, what would that be?
All right. So first thing you need to know is I'm dyslexic.
Okay.
So I don't read a lot,
Okay.
but I do listen to
Okay,
books.
that counts. I'll allow that. Yeah, yeah.
One of my favorite books for just mindset is the Phil Knight story of Nike.
Oh, okay. Is it
Shoe
Shoe
Dog.
Dog? Yeah, yeah. I just
Yeah.
put that in my cart the other day.
Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight story.
Isn't there a movie coming out?
I don't know.
I think there's a movie coming out. I just saw a trailer.
Cool.
And I don't know what it would be like to read the book, but listening to the book
Mhm.
was incredible. My wife and I listened to it together when we were in the car, and we kept having to pause it and just look at each other like, can you Like we all know Nike today,
Mhm.
but to just understand what he went through. I mean, you talk about a mindset. You talk about this idea of 6 months at a time. Like everything I've talked about, you can actually go and listen as you're listening to that book. You're this. I mean, he just had a drive to make it work,
Mhm.
and then it did.
Awesome.
You know, you know,
What was that book name again?
Shoe
Shoe
Dog.
Dog.
Shoe Dog. Okay.
And what I love is the book ends where we all kind of know Nike.
Mhm.
The book ends with, and then we signed a contract with this basketball player named Michael Jordan. That's where the story ends. We all know what happens to Nike after
Mhm.
that. But you're going back to the late 60s, early 70s of how, I mean, the company was around for a long time
Mhm.
that nobody was paying attention,
Mhm.
you know?
I
And I love that. This idea that things come out of nowhere is completely false.
Sure.
There's so much time and energy put into all of these things. But that I still to this day one of my favorite books of just around mindset and grit and tenacity, and there's just something here and I'm going to make it work.
I love it. I have an Audible credit. I'm gonna go pick it up after this. Actually, I think
There you
that's
go.
it's
It's
on my
funny.
it's in my
I
it's in
have
my
one
list
left
anyway.
too. I have one credit too. I'm gonna buy it.
I love it. Jeff, if you were given $30 million into one of your bank accounts, what's the first thing you would spend it on?
I would go and buy a lot of more
Hmm.
properties.
Okay.
I think that's the problem is once you understand, to your point, Jeremy, once you start understanding money as a finance, money as something to be used to grow more money, it's hard to get out of that mindset.
Sure.
And so I think that's my wife and I, when I don't know, the Powerball hit like $2 billion, we were went and bought a lotto ticket,
Sure.
which we don't do.
Right.
And then we were like, okay, so after you pay taxes, it was $936 million. So we were trying to figure out how would we spend it. And like, we were like, we would buy a house on the ocean like we wanted, and we'd give all of our family, $10 million. And even doing all that, we'd only spent like $100 million.
Yeah.
It was like, you don't understand how
It's
much,
hard.
like that's right, how much money that is. And here's the problem. The entire time we're saying that, we're looking at each other going, but the problem is we'd have invested most of it and it would have been 3 times more than what we would have actually gotten.
Right.
So that would have been it. Like we would have, I'm sure we would go and buy, or we would invest in, at our life stage, knowing what our goal is, that we want to be fully retired at 55. We'd probably go and invest in some REITs. We'd probably go and do some capital funding for a large complex. We'd be hands-off money lenders at that point, and let our money go work for us. That'd probably be what my mindset would be, is probably at least 25 million of it, 5 million of it, I don't know, I'd go and
Sure. It's an interesting question because everyone, we talk to a lot of people about that question, and it really makes them think like, what would you do with that money? And a lot of people, they want their passive income at that point. They want their 6 to 7% annualized, and they could just lend it out and live off that, and that's easy
yeah,
peasy. And you would never have to do another thing other than just
yeah,
throw it in someone and trust them.
yep, so true.
What advice would you give newer investors looking to get started on their first or second deal?
I think the advice I would give is um, run your
Hmm.
numbers and then don't be afraid to
I
jump.
love it.
Um, and your numbers aren't always going to be perfect, and it will stretch you. It always stretches
Hmm.
you. And you have to be okay with that. When we bought our first, the condo we bought in downtown Seattle, we were living in Bangkok at the time. I think our interest rate on it was 6%,
Hmm.
and this was 2009 or something. Um, when we bought that and we closed on it, I believe we had 34 cents in the bank
Oh,
account,
wow.
right? And then we had that property and we bought this house where we are now. I think we had like 17 cents
Hmm.
in the bank account. Like we push ourselves. Now, you look back at it and some people will say you were crazy, or you look back and say those were maybe 2 of the best purchases we ever made. Um, thinking about the house that we're in now, the house we're in now, again, we didn't buy turnkey. It had a 15-foot retaining wall falling down in the backyard that nobody else wanted to touch.
Hmm.
We touched it, we got it up. We've almost tripled in 5 years, tripled the value of the house we live in, which has allowed us to take out a massive HELOC, which funds everything else, right? So that, yes, at one point in time, we had 17 cents and we were 43 years old eating top ramen because that's all we could afford again. And now we're good to go. So, you have to know what the long-term plan is, and don't be afraid to take the risk. Know your numbers, trust your numbers, and know what you're comfortable with risk is. Apparently, I'm more comfortable with risk than a lot of people are, but take the risk, take a jump, and see what
I
happens.
love that. That's so good. How do you define success?
Ooh, wow, that's a really good question. I define success by is what I'm doing every day, filling my bucket and making me happy.
I love that. Easy peasy. I love it. That's
Easy
such a good
answer.
answer for that.
Yeah.
When you're not investing, Jeff, what do you like to do with your free time?
My wife and I do a lot of camping, which we're very excited about as soon as this weather
As soon as we
breaks.
get done with eighth
We're
winter
going to be
in
doing
Idaho and Spokane.
Yeah, we love going outside. We love camping. We do a lot of hiking around. I mean, one of the things, you live in the state of Washington, you get those opportunities too. We do a lot of hiking and camping, and like I said before, we travel 55, 56 countries and counting. And our goal in life is always to visit more countries than our age. So we're doing pretty
You're
good.
doing great. I love it.
Yeah.
Stay
Nice.
10 ahead. You're doing a good job. So, where can people find out more about you and more about your consulting and the other podcasts you run?
Yeah, so you can find me everywhere on the interwebs at Utecht. That's Jutecht. My consulting website is just jeffutecht.com, spelled the same way. You can find our real estate. All of our stuff on real estate is g3-homes.com. And my own podcast is the Washington State Real Estate Investor Podcast. You can find that at wsreip.com as well if you're interested on stuff that's specifically focused on the state of Washington, and being able to talk to people like you guys here in the state of Washington, and just really trying to be hyper focused. And again, it's my own professional learning. I wanted to go out. I'm not a big book reader, but I love talking to people.
Sure.
So set up a podcast and go talk to a bunch of people.
I love
and
it.
Just get to learn. There's multiple different ways to learn, and that's one of the ways that I learn best. So that's what I do.
Learn by action and learn by trial by fire, basically.
That's a really
That's
good
right.
way to learn.
Nick, any closing things from you?
Oh, I love what you just said, though. It's a great way to learn is just by talking to people, other investors in the area. I mean, because have you ever seen that pyramid of learning chart where they've got like reading at the top, like 5%, you're going to forget 95% of what you read after 2 weeks. And then the next is like listening. And that's why I like audiobooks, because at least you'll retain 10% and not 5%.
So true.
But when you're actually
true.
talking to people, you're going to be able to retain almost 20% of this, as you talk to people. So I think that's a great way. It's like a learning hack. Start your own podcast and talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And you get to build connections.
Yep,
and
exactly.
I had a guy on my podcast, and then all of a sudden he was a private lender. And then 2 weeks later, a property came up, and I'm like, crap, this is a really good property. We don't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm emailing him like, hey, great to have you on the podcast. And by the way,
Also,
what are your current rates on private money? I've got a duplex.
also, I love it. Yeah.
Right. So it's just also like, how are you building your network? And
Yeah.
podcasting is a great way. So I encourage anybody who is out there listening to this, go be a guest on a podcast. You just get to grow. You don't have to start the podcast. If you don't want to be geek out with audio files, go sign up to be a guest. If you live in the state of Washington, if you go over to our website, just fill out the form. Like, I've never turned anybody down to come on and just chat and talk and be able to share your knowledge and share where you're at in your real estate journey.
I love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you being here. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, gentlemen.
See you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you so much for checking out the Investor Shed podcast. If you enjoyed your time, make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow along on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at The Investor Shed for shorts and promos about each episode. Do you want to be a guest or know someone who has great real estate investing advice and stories? Reach out to us at theinvestorshed@gmail.com.